welcome. We back again, Investor Playbook Part 2. Last week we talked about briefly the beginning stages of investing here. So creative financing with JB is about to take you to the next level of investing, not only in your fix and flip properties, not only in your DSCR properties, not only in your seller financing properties, but we're going to talk about real commercial investments today. We're gonna change the mindset of what we did last week, and we're gonna increase it just a little bit here. So y'all might have a lot of questions. It might come quickly. Stop me. Just say, hey, I got a question that come across the screen. Let it be known that you want to figure out what we're doing here and how we transforming the game here when we get to commercial investing. I'm not just talking about commercial investing just on zoning, but I'm talking about commercial investing when you're purchasing the business as well. You're purchasing the land structure as well as the business. So it's some things that might be a little bit different for some of the folks here tonight that you're probably not aware of, but I want to give you about 8 steps that's going to guide you there to get you to that next step of this way and get you going. As most of y'all know, people, as we in the residential world, we ask for pre-approvals and stuff. And in commercial world, that's not what we use here anymore. Pre-approvals goes for residential properties or, your fix and flip properties or something like that. But when you have a full commercial property here, we're going to have a letter of intent. A letter of intent. What is a letter of intent? A letter of intent is that we have took the scenario to the investor. We have told them our intentions on purchasing. We have told them some basic needs of the business, what the business is making. We're doing estimates here because now we don't have documentation. They review it on a preliminary level, and then they come back and they'll ask they'll offer a letter of intent. A letter of intent provides that this is not a loan commitment. This is for the intent that they will go ahead and fund a project as long as it fits the criteria that we described in the preliminary discussion. What is the terms? For example, we have a apartment building, 200 units. What's that letter intent? We're going to make sure our lease is in place, that we have an occupancy of at least 87% for it, and that we have this much income coming in based on the rents that can be in that area. So that letter of intent will outline that stuff for the borrower or that investor that's purchasing that property, and they will go ahead and start to move forward in that. Without the letter of intent, we don't even have a conversation. We don't even go to the place and tell them that we're looking to place an offer. This is your pre-approval in the commercial world. So what happens is, with this letter of intent that we going to submit, we're going to go ahead and let the seller or the owner of that property know that, hey, I have a letter of intent to purchase it. Here's the funding that they're going to offer me based on what they have for me already. So what do they have for me already? They have my bank statements, a proof of money that I have to cover the down payment. They probably have my good standing. They probably have my corporate documents. They might also want to see that I have any other businesses, don't have no liens, no bankruptcies, no Chapter 11s. All those type of documents will come before us as we start working. And once I get that letter of intent, then I'm able to go ahead and start having a conversation with the seller. I have my letter of intent now. I'm going out there. My letter of intent might fit between $2 to $5 million, depending on what you're trying to buy, depending on what you're able to purchase. Hey, good evening, Mr. Cole. Good evening, Charles, as well. And so with those letter of intents, it'll give the seller the notion that the bank is moving forward in what I'm doing here, that the bank is ready to go forward with it. Have my letter of intent for it. I'm taking it over to the seller. And now I'm doing an interview with that seller. I'm not just going to walk through a facility and he's telling me some information and all that. No, we're doing a full interview with that seller. Is it going to be a one-day interview? Probably not. It might take a couple of weeks. It might take a month, depending on the documentation I need for the seller. So the first thing I'm going to use is I have that apartment complex that I'm using. I'm going to see the seller's business assets. I'm not looking. I'm looking for the profit and loss statement. I'm looking for that rent roll. I'm looking for the occupancy for the last probably 6 months. Sometime it can be 12 months, just to make sure we're in a time frame to see that we have revenue coming through that will suffice provide. Um, we have to keep in mind that if we don't have that see up, we're probably going to have a problem with making sure that it's going to be a loan. What do I mean by that? Well, in January, March, I only had 50% occupancy, or say, for example, in the summer of from April all the way to November, I had 50% occupancies. And then in late November, December, going into the beginning of the year, my occupancy went to 87%. First question is going to be, oh, what's going to happen with that 50% occupancies? Because we still have other fees we have to pay for, employee fees, we have maintenance fees, we have upkeep, we have investors that probably have a mortgage on this as well. Did that 50% encompass that part, or did that seller have to pull money from different assets or different places? So in part of the interview, hey, Mr. Seller, question, what's our occupancy like for the last 12 months? Hesitation, or I don't know right now, I have to look at the books, just leads us that we still on the table. We have to leave that on the table. We have to leave it right there, because now we need to make sure that that's going to be a part of our funding, that we have enough tenants in there. Also with that, do we have viable rents for those tenants? For how much work or upkeep do those places need that's probably vacant? Did I have a lot of vandalism? Those type of questions for and everything. So I want to say, Mr. Seller or Mrs. Seller, because we just got off of Mr. Williams' podcast as we talk about women's ownership, which I'm all for it. But we need to ask those questions for that rents. We know we run promotions for rents, but those promotions can exceed our profit margin that we need to make on that P&L statement. So we're going to look for that profit and loss statement, but more, in fact, I probably want an audited profit and loss statement. What do I mean by an audited profit and loss statement? That your accountant, your CPA, your tax professional that perform these taxes have looked at the bank statements for monies going into that account to suffice that our rent matches up what we've been doing. So you go through that audited profit and loss statement, so we know that's accuracy right there, because a CPA is doing it. They're licensed, they're professionals, they're the expert matters, expert specialists that's going to provide that information for us to make sure that stuff happens. As part of the first part of the conversation, then we have the we're going to review and analyze the value of the business. The building's worth a whole lot, but the business, how much is our business worth? Is our business have any value at all? So we're going to look at as far as structure of how we break down that investment for the business, for applications being filed and our employees. And, I'm selling ABC properties. Is our properties only worth the building value, or is the business have some liability too? So what we're going to look at business taxes. That's going to break down the definition of what is that business worth? How much is that business really getting? And am I spending this? Am I buying just the property? Because sometimes we have it where we're writing up a contract and here, and people want to sell the business assets as well as the structure or the property, the real property. So we need to break that down to see what's real property and what's business. What is that value of that? Is that a household name out there? Are they trading or anything to that effect? So that's another question. Do my business have any licenses that's going to be renewed that I'm coming into here? What does my license look like? Do I need an elevator license here? Do I need a special permits for hazardous materials around here? Is my garbage leaking and it can cause a storm water drain issue? So those are environmental issues that we should also have. CJ Johnson said, would we have to get an appraisal, or is it based on the type of funding? This is Therese, Stephanie's friend, phone number. And I would say, okay. How we doing, Therese? So Therese, we will still need appraisal. We'll need a commercial appraisal for this property, as you will see, and it's going to be based on the value of that building. They're going to look at they're going to look at apartments. They're going to look at the whole structure of it for it. This is not a cheap appraisal. So I just want to be upfront and transparent for you. If we're doing this 200 units and they coming back and they said appraisal cost is $60,000, that's a real number. That is a real number for an appraisal. That is a number that we want to keep in mind, that it has to be paid for at the time of going in there after you do all your homework. So we're not going to pay for that appraisal prior to us even finishing this interview, because we don't know if we're going to have a deal based on how the seller's panning out, because our value of what they're trying to ask for might be overestimated, I want to say, and going from there. Also, so do you also look at the surroundings to determine the evaluation? Absolutely. The surrounding areas do determine the evaluation. The property upkeep, the fees for maintaining, if you have a guard there, if you have employees watching maintenance, if you have wash and dryers in that apartment complex, for it. So not only we're going to have an appraisal, but we're going to do an environmental phase one. A phase one is not an in-depth environmental to make sure that we're still not polluting out there to the environment, which is an OSHA fine. And those fines can get pretty hefty based on that. And you probably say, well, why does the bank care? Because it becomes a lien if the seller doesn't pay and they don't take care of it. If the issue continues to go on, if that stormwater drain might need a mat over it, if people just pouring soda down there, you have a lot of garbage running into that. And it needs to be protected because it's just for regular rainwater. They have codes for those drains, and you got to be familiar with that too when you evaluating these commercial properties for it. So your due diligence period is a little longer than normal for the fact that you have to really figure out where we're going, and we're going to get down further into looking at violations and stuff for that type of stuff. But we're right now we're going through the licenses. Is my elevator license with the state? Is my permit up to date? Do I need inspections? Have I had servicing properly over that time? And is that servicing adequate to what I'm doing? Is my capacity levels, have that been checked? We have seen, we've done seen incidences in elevators where we see them dug, they haven't been worked on for long periods of time. And back, and you gotta say, when's the last time maintenance? So for you have a maintenance log of that. Even for the drains, you have a log. Those have been checked when service, and they come out and provide that service for that. For that as well. Is our garbage in a safe end? We're not contaminating anything else out there, because we know in complexes and developments, our kids play. They fall, and it comes out, and and when they come out, you come back and you say, wow, this is a big issue here, for it. So kids can get affected. So that's another lawsuit that we talking about, that probably have to get in. My good friend Gary Williams have joined us here to be working with us on this commercial standpoint here. So we just going over some stuff right now. Gary's a commercial guru too. He done stepped into the environment. And Gary, tell me about some of the licenses. We talk about licenses for your commercial businesses. If you need something, if you got elevators or anything that your business might have needed when you got your commercial property.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. I was hoodwinked and getting in the back door. Thank you, Chuck, for putting me in this place, in this space, I should say. But the commercial buildings that I've had, sometimes you would need sprinkler systems. Fortunately, I don't need sprinkler systems where I'm at, but you do have to have a fire alarm system that's connected to the fire company. So I mean that might be something, depending on how old your building is. New construction, of course, you're gonna need a sprinkler system. But in my commercial buildings, that we just needed a hardwired fire alarm system that's connected to the fire company in case of a fire. Of
And,
course,
and, Yeah, and that's interesting you say that, because we're talking about licensing and we're talking about funding for that. So I mean, it's a cost for that hardwired system there, and you probably have to get a special company that came out and did that, I suppose.
yes, absolutely, absolutely. Of course, they had to be licensed um, and insured um, to be able to put the system in. And then once they put the system in, they also had a monitoring system. Um, sort of like ADT and all of those other Brinks. They have their own monitoring system in case of emergency, that the fire company would be alerted, and also they'll send me alert because I don't live at the commercial buildings.
Mm. Yeah, and somebody asked a question here, that is it easy? It doesn't make a difference if it's in the suburbs or it's in the city. It's the same. It's the
Yeah.
same license. It's the same cost that's associated with it, and it's not cheap. So
Hmm.
for it, CJ, if you purchase an apartment building and will inquire about getting funding, I should ask the seller for the documentation and info prior to purchasing. That's a conversation. We're talking about the interview here. So you're going into, and you find Gary. He's a realtor, and Gary's taking you in there with a letter of intent. Those are conversations y'all probably going to have of things that you need to know for funding
Yeah,
for it,
and
if you got occupancy.
sometimes the license are, they have them on display. So like in my building, you only can have a certain amount of people in a commercial space. So, and those licenses have to be prominently displayed, so people can view them on the walls, and or in an area where the license supposed to be. It even says it on each of the license that you have to prominently display this. So sometimes those have to be in an area where people will go past and look at it. I have mine in a frame.
Mhm. How often do those licenses need to be renewed, Gary?
In a lot of instances, they could be yearly, they could be every other year. I know with my fire alarm, they have to come out every 2 years. Yeah, for my fire alarm system, they have to come.
So you got,
And then and then and
is that
then
a
you might
cost
even
for that
have.
when they come out?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. There's a cost for everything. It seems that way. Even with the fire extinguishers, after a certain, I don't know if you ever noticed, it has a tag on a fire extinguishers. If those tags expire, you have to buy commercial fire extinguishers, and those come with a cost too. They range from anywhere from $100 to $250, depending on how big you got to get it. So and they are hung near the entrances and stuff like that, or wherever you might have something. If you have some type of cooking area, something like that, but you usually put them near the entrance of the doors.
Mhm. Yeah, and y'all got to remember that, if you have a cooking area there, you're gonna have more things, because you're gonna have the
Hmm.
hoods for
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
stoves and stuff, and that's another expense. So we're talking about, we're interviewing the the bar, we're interviewing the seller to find out these details, so we will know that, when we're getting funding, all this stuff's going to come out, all these inspections, this money for those inspections going to come out, and then you're going to have to figure out, whoa, this is what I have in store for that. This is the money I need to save. But I think it's not for the faint at heart. It gets expensive, and it can be over and over and over. So during your interview period, this is the conversation I'm having with Mr. and Mrs. Seller, of these things, and what type of business agreements we have in place. You have an office at Gary has an office at his facility, and he has other businesses there, but you might have certain services that you have an agreement with, like we was talking about fire extinguishers. We're talking about alarm systems for that goes on to the next borrower. So that borrower need to know what those agreements look like, what the costs associated with those agreements is like.
How
If
about
you're
the
in the
elevator and the
elevator.
transaction we recently did? The
Mhm.
the buyer bought a facility that had an elevator. The elevator comes, a certain amount of time before you have to have somebody come out there and service it and check it, it actually has a license that a licensed elevator operator
Permit.
would have
Mhm.
look at it and put a certification. I mean, put a certification that, hey, that they serviced it, and you know um, they
Mhm.
okayed it, and it's going to be good for the certification is good for a year or two or whatever time. But that's primarily in that elevator as well. I don't know if you ever noticed that.
Yeah, yeah, and that's important. And that elevator got to be serviced. They don't just keep going up and down. It's a service fee for it. It's a maintenance that you have to perform on there. It might be done quarterly. It might be done semi-annually. Whatever's the requirement by the state for it, that's what need to be followed. And you have to be very familiar with that, to where you're doing your research of looking at it, because now you're looking at the cost. And as we started out, that you're going to encounter when you purchase this property, and you have to see if the revenue that's coming in meets it, exceeds it, or it falls below it. So we have to make some adjustments according to that. According to that, I mean, copy machines, you might even have agreements with those. We had one in there where they have a copy machine. They rent those copy machines because they might be too expensive to buy,
Mhm.
for it as well. So, you're still interviewing, and that's why I tell you the interview might not be one day. I mean, me and Gary worked on that thing for a few months. It was a couple of things we had to figure out what was going on there. And for us to figure that out, we had to go in intricate details of what was going on there. We had to walk around, we had to figure it out and know what it was. Garbage has an agreement. Your garbage has an agreement. When they come pick that thing up, this is what they charge for it. All those are types of conversations we have with the seller, certain questions we ask them. Gary, what about you? You have a different type of commercial space where you lease to different people, so they want to know the leases that you have in place
Absolutely.
for those.
Yep. That, and also they I just wanted to piggyback off of what you had said earlier. Laundry. It's a
Hmm.
laundry service as well that
Hmm.
that you should know what's the cost for that laundry, especially if you have a facility that you're getting ready to purchase with people in it, and
Hmm.
you're doing their laundry, especially if it's a whatever type of, whether or not
Yeah,
it's citizen.
apartment building, assisted living,
Right.
whatever.
So yeah, so you want to know that as well. Um,
Yeah, for it.
do like you said, you definitely want to, once you acquiring a building that have leases already in place, you want to look at those leases that they're month to month. If they're 2 years, what's the amounts? Are they too low? How many vacancies you have, and what's the tendency for the vacancies, and what's the root cause for the vacancy? Is one tenant causing all the problems with a barking dog, or 25 kids running around over top of everybody, jumping up and down? So you need to know all of that before you pull a trigger for sure.
Yeah, and if you're getting into big commercial like your plazas and your storefronts, you got to look at your depreciation in
Yeah.
those other stores. Not only leasing, what type of upkeep it needs to be. What type of cam fees do we have out there
Mhm.
that those other owners are paying for? And the cam fees, folks, is a parking spots out there. You get the building, you don't get the space to park the car, so that's a separate amount of money that that person that's running might go out there and say, hey, you use about maybe 7 of these lots, for your business, or you might have something to go. But if I have a sit down restaurant
Mhm.
and I can seat 100 people, my can fee is going to be higher than that Chinese store that have takeout.
Yeah.
And the reason why, because I have more people that's going to be parked there. They're taking up that space than those Chinese folks, because they can probably have DoorDash or, Uber Eats or whatever they have to pick it up, or the people just going to come by and pick up their food and go, unlike a alcohol store or something like that.
Johnny, talk about insurance too, because and I'll give you for instance, in the buildings I own, I may have an office and rent out to other commercial vendors, and then upstairs residential. All those people supposed to have their own insurance. They're not riding on my coattail. Some act- they ain't getting anything. So
Right.
they have, is that right? They need to have their own
Right.
insurance, right?
Right, right. Everybody, every man for themselves. The owner's going to have his insurance that's going to protect his facility, but he's not going to cover any of your damaged equipment in your property. What he's worried about is that his property is going to get rebuilt, and so he can put somebody else back in there. He not going to put chairs in there. If it's a barber shop, he ain't going to put no mirrors in there. If you got a grocery store, he ain't buying no groceries for it. He's making sure that the whole real property goes back up so those services can be rendered out there to the community. So what do you need in there? If you have employees, you got to think about workman's comp and
Mhm.
insurance there, because if somebody get hurt, what happens? If somebody get hurt in your store, it's not the owner's fault that that happened, because they need to come to that store and get it. And the owner's going to make sure that you have that when you sign that up, and that stays in place for it. Or somebody, or if it lapses, that insurance company notifies the owner and that bank, if they got a loan on that thing. Hey, this person ain't got no insurance here, and then we're going to have to do some forced place insurance, or we're going to have to do something, or we're going to have to close your store um, until you get that insurance, because that's part of your agreement when you sign your lease. And please remember, just because you close your store, don't mean you don't owe rent, because you signed a lease and you're still contractually obligated to pay that money. So it's good to stay ahead.
Yeah. Talk about um, like you may have made a commitment to your tenant to say, hey, you know what, in like 5 years or whatever time period, you plan on renovating, that particular unit
Yeah.
for that tenant, you know,
Hmm.
and then um, what type of cost that's going to be. So in my one situation I have, I renovated. I had promised a particular tenant that I was going to do some renovations in there, but he was going to do other things or whatnot, painting, putting
Hmm.
lighting up and stuff like that. And it's a cost that you got to consider, especially when you're taking over a property that you want to put some skin in the game to
Hmm.
keep the tenants happy, so to speak, and show them that, hey, you know what, you in it for the long haul. You're going to be upgrading your building, you know what I mean, and then you want them to pay and stay, so to speak. So initially that's what I did. I saw the need for that particular tenant. I thought it was dilapidated, so to speak. So I put money in there. However, I also in the lease said, hey, over a certain period of time, the rent is going to go up 5%, every year. So I gained my money back off the initial investment I put into that.
Yeah, yeah, and that's so important because you got
Mhm.
appreciation costs for it is based on that, so you can keep a certain level of cleanliness in that property. Almost like Marriott, you got to look at Marriott hotels. After so many years, they have to upgrade the couches, all that stuff, and keep going. And what happened? That goes through the cost of who's renting hotels or whatever, so you can see that cost and where that money's going. So I'm going now from a continental breakfast to a hot breakfast now. So that rate is going to change tremendously in that hotel for it. And you're going to keep going. You're going to have to go through there to understand that appreciation, depreciation cost. Something I want to talk about is UCCs. People might use those as solar panels or the water systems or something like that for it. But UCCs in the commercial aspect, fix your filings that you're going to need. We had it one time. I was working on a place in Jersey that the bank gave the people the loan for the building, but somebody else gave them a fix your filing. So when they went and they didn't pay them people for them air conditioning units and stuff, they came and took them out the building.
Wow.
And the people said, "Oh, no, no, no. We bought the bill. Yeah, you financed the building. You didn't finance the light fixtures. You didn't finance the air conditioner units. None of those systems. You finance the building, so you're going to get a building. That's what you're going to get. Anything that's in there that's a fixture filing, and it has a UCC on it. You have to make sure that if you're the owner or somebody else or your tenant didn't get a UCC on there to rent that stuff there, because when it comes out, it comes out. They take it. When we finance big commercial properties, we want to make sure that we doing a whole kit and caboodle air conditioner system, and those are conversations we're gonna have. Who's doing your HVAC? What about your lighting system? Your alarm system. You got any special key codes? That we need to know, because anybody that finance that is their merchandise. That is their part of the property, so they can come and remove that.
Yeah. Talk about signage. Um, that's
Signage.
huge. That's
Yes.
actually huge because you don't want the tenant to be putting any old signs up. You know what I mean? And you don't want them to put them in your wall and messing up your wall. So especially on the exterior, You want them to put it up, if you allow that to occur, to put it up professionally without messing up your exterior wall, and inside you don't want them to be messing up. So talk about that a little too.
Yeah. Yeah, so you know you have your marketing that goes out, which is a whole separate funding when in your lease. So your lease covers, and I want to be clear, that covers the building inside where I'm at right now.
Mhm.
That stuff outside, that's a cost for that. So I'm going to go to Gary, Mr. Williams. You know, I got to put up here JJ's barbershop here and stuff. He's like, oh, okay, let me see how much that guy that does our signage charge for that. No, 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 no. I got somebody that's going to do it. No, no, no. This is what comes with what we have. We have somebody that does it. We'll probably have two options, but this is who we have to use for that. Don't think that the owner is responsible for your signage.
Mhm.
If you're going to use a door, you might have that conversation prior to you going to, hey, you know, I'm going to use this door here, and I'm going to put JJ Barbie shop on it, and I'm a dark tenant so nobody can look in. We have to make sure that as the owner, them people are getting permission.
Mhm.
They're renters, they're not owners. So you want to ask anybody you purchasing from, you know, did you, what type of agreement do you have for your signage, for your tenants here? And I'm gonna say, oh man, I just let them do what they do. For no, we can't have that.
Yeah, I had a tenant once, um, called electrician to put in a heater, and I'm like, yo, as soon as I call him, I said he ain't even licensed. What are you doing? You know what I mean? You can't have him working on anything in this building. You know what I mean? Um, so I had to stop that and call my licensed electrician, who normally works on the building, and say, hey,
Mm-hmm.
this particular tenant wants a heater put in this unit, because she, the baseboard heat wasn't working as good as she wanted it. But you have to sometimes got to stop the tenants in doing things that is not in the lease. First of all, you
Yeah.
can't, and that could cause problems, for other tenants that's there. So.
Yeah, and remember, these are not residential leases. These are commercial leases.
Mhm.
They outline specifically what you're doing in that space. It's based on square footage, of how you, as an owner of that facility, of what you're running in square footage for it. You're letting know the liabilities for X, Y, and Z. You letting them know about signage. You letting them know about electricity.
Mhm.
Um, you letting them know about if they have bathroom usage and maintenance, even cleaning. You
Mhm.
know, we might have a cleaning company that come clean the whole building. So this is part of the agreement here. That's why that lease might not fit you. If you're like, nah, I got my man right here. He do it here for $15. But nah, your man's not gonna be here at 12 o'clock and somebody come in and bust up my building, you know, and do that. So we have these people here that's licensed, bonded, and secured to
Mhm.
where they going in there. If something's missing, we can go ahead and we can file a claim with those folks. That's why when you buy these commercial spots, you asking the questions to these owners of what they have in place, for what they have in place, because everything comes with a cost. We don't know what it is, and if you don't have enough money coming in, your business is not going to be productive. It's not going to grow. You're going to have a lot of tax write-offs, but at some point in time, them tax write-offs become into whole losses for that business. And Gary, tell us, you bought that commercial property. You probably had a lot of questions when you went in there and was rehabbing it with even your plumbing, your electric, all of that.
Yeah, and that's a great point. Because when I initially purchased it, I got it at a good price, so I knew firsthand I would have to deal with termites, because I seen termites in there,
Mm.
water leak. The termites just they had juice and wood, and they just went to town. They had what they needed, so I know I deal with termites. I had to deal with a plumbing system. I had to deal with putting in sump pumps because the basement had water, you know what I mean, or it was moist. So it's different things you know when you're looking at a building that you gotta almost either you have to almost budget for that in
Mm-hmm.
long haul, and then write it off like you said in your taxes,
Mm-hmm.
because that's upgrade. I mean, that's renovation that you then did, and go from there. So I know initially I might have put close to like 200,000 in that in one building, just renovating it and getting it to where I needed to be. And it's paying off now because I'm not having to do the renovations because I already did them. I don't have to, I can just watch it. I don't have to be down there putting a band-aid on there. If you fix it right the first time, it should last. As long as no one is messing it up and intentionally trying to sabotage it, it should just run by itself, so to speak.
And Gary said something very important. Termite inspection. That's another cost.
Mm-hmm.
That's another cost, and it can be a monthly cost. It can be a quarterly cost that you incorporating into your commercial space here. So you got to have that termite inspection done because he had it done when he
First,
bought the building, when he purchased it. But what happens after a couple of years? Yeah, he took care of the problem, but we need to keep it up to date. And the lender's going to want to know that. I'm going to want to know, hey, you had a termite inspection. When's the last time it happened? What is it rated for that in that area? And then you're going to say, well, I don't know. I ain't never had none. That's going to be a red flag for the lender. The reason it's going to be a red flag is eating up the property. We don't have a sound structure. And when termites get in there, it causes havoc. So
yeah.
guess what? We losing money
Mhm.
and all that stuff. Guess what? We're going to have that insurance that pay for if I'm losing money on that property. Owners of commercial property has insurance that covers for daily losses, like in hotels. If a hotel had a fire for it and they can't gain that revenue, that insurance and the lender makes sure that you have that insurance in place that covers you when you're losing money. So when we talking about insurance too, we like, hey, did he have enough insurance coverage in case something happened? Fire, flooding, natural disaster to cover you during those time frames. And those are costs that we have to think about when we thought Gary talking about $200,000, and that's not no little bit of money because probably a lot of that came out of his pocket, his savings of what he has done to maintain that building. So when he goes in there and he tell that barber, hey, your rent for this place alone is $4,000. Oh, that's my electric. No, no, no. Now your electric is going to be whatever that electric bill is, and if we have different water meters where you can have for different places, this your water consumption. So it's all broken down to where you might think $4,000 turn out to be almost $5,500 because you have other costs there. So when people come in there to get those services, you got to make sure you have the clientele. You got to make sure that's happening. And as an owner, I'm just coming to pick up that money for it. I have to give you a notice if you don't meet that due date because I still have a mortgage to pay on this building here, and all this comes into play. That's why
Mhm.
I said this is the interview. This is the interview before you even get in there with the folks. And sometime, when Gary probably bought his building, maybe the people didn't have 8 hours that day. He might have to do 2 hours and then come back and do another inspection. People said, "Man, you coming by here a whole lot,"
Mhm.
because I'm just doing one piece at a time.
Mhm. Mhm. Uh,
I'm for it.
yeah, I recently got a call from a contractor who does solar panels.
Mm,
So I have a meeting this week to look at putting solar panels. So that's a new nuance. So for me, it will be a nuance. For others, they probably went down that path before. But just to see if I can lessen the cost of, an electrical Pico bill to see what that would look like. Because
Hmm.
the roof is, exposed to sunlight. So I'm figuring it should be, a good a source of electricity, but we'll see. I'll report back to you and let you know.
Yeah, and yeah,
And then,
and what's going to happen? We remember we was talking about UCC.
mm-hmm, absolutely.
Okay?
And then
We
I
was
was
talking
going
about
to
UCC. So
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Go ahead. Now I was going to talk about the
Yeah.
roof that is actually going on. Um, the roof is new, so to they were questioning me what kind of roof it is, and I told them, it's a flat roof. They were saying, is it new, is it old? Because they're worrying about, I believe, if it start leaking and me blaming them for it leaking. So it'll be interesting to see what the guy says,
Hmm.
because I'm sure he's going
Hmm.
to want to go
And that's
roof.
so important.
Hmm. Do we have a delay?
He gonna want that inspection.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, we do. Um, um, yeah, he gonna want that inspection, but he's probably gonna say, hey, Mr. Williams, it's no cost right now. You're gonna keep doing it. We're gonna do the bill, but on the back end, that's another question. Do I got a UCC on this? A UCC is another lien. So I just want to be clear. It's almost like a second mortgage. It's a silent mortgage until you're ready to do something to the property.
Hmm.
So what happens is you get solar panels, and in the homes now they tell you it's no cost to you right now, but if you try to refinance your home and you have solar panels or you have that water system and they have that UCC going to pop up, it's a cost with that. So when you're refinancing, the catch to that is that you want to make sure that they will subordinate so they can stay in second position. And I'm giving Gary $1 million and their panels only cost 250,000. I want to make sure that that amount is still, I'm still in first place for that amount, and that it keeps moving forward as forward. Also, we're gonna discuss now is county violations and approvals needed. You know, we're buying this property um, for it, and guess what? We need to check with the county, and we need to check with the make sure that we don't have no outstanding violations from that seller. Nothing is overdue. They haven't missed any, ignored any violations that have been sent to them, and get that approval so that can be obtained. Usually, you're gonna talk to them. If they don't let you know, you got to be upfront with them in the interview process to let them know that, hey, if you don't tell me about any county violations, when they run this title, it's going to come up. So you interviewing them and you asking, and they come back and say, oh man, you got a county violation for garbage outside your building from LNI that happened.
Hmm.
So the seller has an outstanding bill of $11,000 because it's been lingering for a couple of years. That
Hmm.
is something that need to be discussed, because if you write that contract up, if they say, Gary, write that contract up, tell them as is, and we
Hmm.
ain't paying nothing, you're going to be responsible for that. For it. So you have to put some type of language in there that protects you when you out there writing those type of situations up, to say, hey, if this comes up, I want you to know you're responsible because you told me that it was clear and free, but by our conversation here. Because usually in a commercial agreement, you don't have a seller's disclosure, you
Absolutely.
know, for it. So you don't have that seller's disclosure like you buying real property. And that's why you're doing this interview process and the due diligence prior
Hmm.
to that. Does that due diligence cost money? It absolutely do. To do that due diligence might cost you $9,000 or $10,000.
Hmm.
So and that's
Depending on
not
the
money that
property.
goes. Yeah, that's not money that comes from closing. That's out your pocket.
Yep.
That's protecting you in the long run. So
Yep.
Gary goes by his commercial building. He don't do his due diligence, and then all of a sudden he got all this stuff that piling up on him.
Stuck
Um,
like Chuck is called.
you're responsible now. You're
Hmm.
gonna have to handle that. You're gonna have to take it up and figure how you're gonna fix that with the county,
Hmm.
and go from there, because that is gonna be so important to make sure that is handled, and go from there. Our last thing we're gonna talk about for this commercial purchase and stuff. I'm buying Gary's building now, and this commercial spot. Gary, I need to see your operation agreement. I need
Hmm.
to I need to see who owns it.
Yes.
And he's like, oh no, it's Williams LLC. I
Hmm.
mean, is that just Gary Williams?
Hmm. And is
You
that
know,
LLC in good standing?
is it in good standing?
Hmm.
Did you pay
Hmm.
your taxes for that LLC this year? Did you say, man, I'm just gonna let it go until I sell this thing, and hopefully, if I sell it before June 1st, they ain't gonna catch me. you know,
Hmm.
because that remember the LLC taxes go in reverse. So
Hmm.
when you pay in 2025, you're paying for 2024.
Hmm.
And you have to be very mindful of that. So Gary sells me that building this May, and he LLC is dirty, no good standing, and stuff like that.
For years, it's been dirty for years.
Years. You're buying into that, because now remember, you're just not buying the building, you're buying the business.
Hmm.
And part of that business is that operating agreement in that LLC.
Hmm.
I'm not talking about one unregistered, neither. I'm talking about one that's notarized, completed, been certified, stamped, so we know that stuff is happening here. This commercial investment is, I tell folks, it's not for the faint at heart. It's expensive, but it's an interview process prior to you just walking through a building and it looking beautiful. I can go through, man, this is nice, this is beautiful, but I have a whole lot of things lingering outside of the structure of the building. It's
Hmm.
almost like buying a bad car. I tell people, man, you see that car been sitting on that lot, that Mercedes, it looks so clean, tires shining, rim, it starts, boom, and go from there. So the operating agreement should be notarized, which makes it certified. And I want to say this, it depends on the state that you're in.
Hmm.
So in Delaware, we don't have to have it certified and stuff. In Pennsylvania, they have certification for it. It depends on that state law. Maryland, I believe that they have state and certified. So when you go and you get your formation agreement, in some of these states, they stamp that operating agreement, so it'll be a binding with that formation.
Hmm.
So if you need to make a change to that, you have to go back to your legal professional or whoever did it for you, and
Hmm.
make sure they do a resolution or an addendum to that. What is a resolution? A resolution would be similar to an addendum in the residential world. So resolutions say, I, Gary Williams, sole owner of Williams LLC, do add and announce Yvette Brooks Williams as a co-owner of this property and 50% ownership. And that has to be updated and stamped and notarized in that state that you doing it, if it's required. Because if you don't, the title company go off and say, this is just Gary. He's the only one signing. What's she doing here? Nah, nah, nah. I need that check. We got a resolution. Where's it at? They're going to have to pull that stuff from the Secretary of State
Hmm.
and go through that and run it all the way through for it and everything. But
Does
this
that have to
this is
be registered? Does that have to be registered with the state, Johnny?
it depends on the state. I believe Maryland does, Pennsylvania does. You have a couple of states, New York do. It depends on the state, and you have to go to your Secretary of State to
Hmm.
verify that, to make sure that registration is in good standing, that it stands out, and that is upholding to that agreement. folks, I'm just telling you, it's a conversation we have to have. You got Gary, he's going to show you the building. I'm going to talk to the lending part of it, but it's so important to have somebody that has the knowledge to walk you through there and ask those questions. So, when you new to this commercial and you don't have somebody that never did it before, you set yourself up for bad strategy here to fail. So
Yeah.
you got Gary. Go ahead.
Check this out. What if you buying a building and you have merchandise in there, or you have you know different items in the property
Hmm.
that is separate from the property,
Hmm.
but it's merchandise. It could be equipment. It
Hmm.
could be product. How do you separate the two
Well, remember we
in
was talking
a
about
purchase?
agreements there, and you're going to have a business agreement for
Hmm.
those items that's in there. That's going to be totally separate from your lease agreement. So,
Hmm.
so that business agreement is, see the back of Gary's wall, all that stuff is in there as part of there. You can put
Hmm.
chairs, tables, desks wherever you want to. You can put a subdivided here for it. You can go from that, long as you don't touch those items there, because that's going to be part of the business agreement. Violation of the business agreement is violation of the lease. When you
Mm.
do that, you're going to suffer whatever penalties they want to instill on you, that owner, once that happens. So when you're in there and you have a building and your people say, "Oh man, Gary, I'm gonna take that whole brown wall down, and then I'm
Hmm.
gonna paint it like this," and you said, "Nah, well, if you're gonna do that, we're gonna have to add some money for you to do that, because I want to put it back when you leave."
How about
So so your deposit was 15,000. Now I need $27,000
that?
deposit. 27, yeah, 12,000, because I got to redo that back, and that's a cost to redo it, because that's part of the business agreement. That's the structure. Because it's Gary's building. He wants to promote his stuff. So if he has in a corner Williams LLC performance,
Hmm.
that's what it can have your name there as the business, but you have to protect what's in there as well for it and everything.
Great,
But
great point.
folks, I mean, we had a great session today. I thank Gary for coming through, stopping with us. Creative financing with JB. You got Gary Williams there, your award-winning realtor. For it, I mean, get the experience you need when you get into this commercial space.
Hmm.
We have a lot of great realtors out there. I'm not taking that away, but you got to get somebody that knows the product, knows what you're doing, knows the type of facility you're about to buy, and knows the questions to ask. Because if you can't figure them out, you need somebody to figure them out for you. Yeah, you got any closing words for us? Hold on, we
No,
got
I,
CJ have. If those items are included on the contract or in the lease, which belongs to the leasing, can you use those assets as collateral to get additional funding? Additional funding, if you buying the building, that's going to be up to the seller
mhm.
for it. So if he wants to sell that to you, CJ, yeah, that's fine, but it's going to be a cost associated with it, and it's going to be something that you're going to have to make sure you're going to ask them. Hey, if you leave that up there, or are you taking that? What's the cost for that? For it, and they need to set a price based on that, and it'll be outlined in your purchase agreement when you buying it. So it's going to be a commercial purchase agreement. It's going to be a lot more pages. It's going to be more in depth to what you're buying. But tonight we went over the interview part right now of the conversation we're going to have, and later on, probably in June, we're going to come back and we're going to probably bring Gary or one of the guys back, kind of get a commercial agreement, so you can kind of see what's happening on that commercial agreement, and what type of questions they're asking, why they're asking it, and how they're going to break that down. But folks, I appreciate y'all tonight. This creative financing with JB, man. We gonna have more information coming for you next week. We're gonna talk about our 203 consultant. We're gonna have a 203 consultant that's gonna come talk about renovation loans for FHA. for it. It's going to be something new, something exciting. Don't miss out for it. See you next Tuesday at 7 o'clock, and I appreciate y'all coming through.